Hello, I'm Colin,
And I'm Charlie.
and welcome to C&C Talks' Season 2 highlights.
Yeah, today we're going to be focusing on the political side and revisiting the top political stories we covered from every episode this season. But because we don't want you guys to have to sit through a 5-6 hour video, we'll be splitting this into two parts. This part will cover the first half of the season, episodes 1 through 20, which span from our first episode of the year up until mid-June.
Yeah, and part 2, that which will cover the rest of the year, that'll come out tomorrow. But it's also pretty important to note that this does not cover every single story from the first half of 2023, but rather the story that we thought was the most important that we covered on each week that we did the podcast, and which this should give you a general review of the year. But Charlie, when I look back at the first half of the year, we covered some wild stories. I mean, we started out the year talking about the speaker drama in the House of Representatives. Classified documents not long after were found at President Biden's home. Tyree Nichols was murdered by police, and a Chinese spy balloon was found above the United States.
Yeah, Biden gave his State of the Union address, a train derailed in East Palestine, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, increasing fears of a recession. There was a shooting in Nashville that led to massive protests and 2 Democrats being expelled from the chamber. Speaking of people being expelled from the chamber, that also happened in Montana. And unfortunately, that was one of many shootings we talked about on the show, with another big one happening in Dallas as well.
Yeah, yes, there was. But then finally, Charlie, we got to the accountability part of 2023. One of the things that 2023 will definitely be known for. Trump indicted multiple times. George Santos, he got indicted. Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon, they were both fired from their cable news shows. And then finally, right around episode 20 of our show this year, Congress finally was able to reach a deal to raise the debt ceiling, Charlie.
Yeah, now, I think without further ado, let's revisit each of these political moments to see what our thoughts were and how they were covered.
Start with what's going on in the House of Representatives. And again, it's really important to say we are taping this for, as I'm speaking right now, it is 4:38 p.m. Pacific time. And things are very, very fluid right now in the House of Representatives, where they failed to elect a speaker to the first 3 ballots today. Today, as we're taping this, the House will reconvene at 12 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. The House, they cannot swear in new members of Congress without a speaker chosen. So the House is currently not a functioning body. Now, Kevin McCarthy, of course, the expected person for the Republicans, he's been unable to get the 218 votes that's needed for election. In fact, he's been unable to get more than 203. There's currently 222 Republicans in the Congress, so 19 Republicans, and on the latest ballot, 20 Republicans have defected from McCarthy, so it seems really unlikely that he could get there. Jim Jordan has been getting votes from far-right members, but it's difficult to see how he could be elected, given that you also need votes from more moderate Republicans. Steve Scalise is another name that's popped up, but McCarthy really wants to be Speaker. It's unclear if he's going to go along with anything. And I mean, he has a vote. So ultimately, just really unclear how this all proceeds. What are your thoughts, Charlie?
Yeah, I think clearly this needs to be complete. This can't be completed until there's a consensus, but also this needs to be completed quickly because the House is currently, as you said, not a functioning body of government, which of course it's needed to be. So I think eventually McCarthy will end up winning this, but I think it is a lot closer than expected, and it shows that there might be a little small split forming in the Republican Party.
Yeah. So you mentioned that. Like, how do you think it reflects on the party to the voters, though? What would you say?
I would say we saw clearly during the midterm elections that there was a split between the more moderate Republicans and the more further right candidates, and I think that's being shown here with Jordan getting votes from the far right.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I feel like, how can the Republican Party be trusted to govern the American people if they literally are in such disarray that they can't elect a speaker? The last time that the speaker's election went to a second ballot, 1923. It's been 100 years. And McCarthy now unable to get his caucus. This is a group of people who have no clue what they're doing. Why should we trust them to be capable of passing any sort of legislation right now? So I think it reflects really badly on them as a party. I think that the Democrats really enjoyed the proceedings, unusual for a minority party to enjoy them that much, but there it is. They just get to sit back and watch the Republican Party collapse in on itself, basically.
Yeah, so we're going to start this episode with Kevin McCarthy. Finally, after 15 ballots of voting in the House of Representatives, has finally won speakership. This is historic, of course. This hasn't happened. This hasn't happened in a very long time that we have had to go to several ballots. There was a small group of 20 far-right Republicans who were stopping this maneuver. That number grew to 21 before McCarthy eventually gave so much in concessions that he finally pulled those 20 to vote for him in the 15th ballot.
Yeah, and some of those concessions are just, I mean, absolutely terrible. They completely gutted the Office of Congressional Ethics. The House Freedom Caucus, which is this far-right caucus, they're now going to have several seats on the House Rules Committee, which means that they'll basically be able to decide what comes to the floor of the House. Lots of other prime committee assignments for Freedom Caucus members as well, guaranteed votes on certain Republican priorities, just a whole list of things. And I mean, what this shows is that Kevin McCarthy, Charlie, really wants to be speaker, but he only wants the fame from the speakership. He wants to be seen with the picture of him holding the gavel while everyone else is applauding. He doesn't actually really care that much of the actual power. He basically gave up all of his power to the far right group. And you know why those far right members, Charlie, felt so empowered to do what they did?
Why is that?
Because Kevin McCarthy, for the longest time, has empowered them. If, say, after January 6th, he had just gone in after them, maybe tried to take steps to expel them from Congress, as some Democrats were pushing for, like actually crack down hard on members of his caucus that were like trying to overthrow the United States' democracy, then maybe he wouldn't have been in this spot. He would have actually been able to get stuff done as speaker. Instead, he's just going to get to hold a gavel and bang it a few times, and then the far right members are going to hold all of the power. And just a disaster for McCarthy, and humiliating too, right? It took 15 ballots. The last time it took 2 ballots, 1923. I believe that McCarthy's speaker election, I think that this took the 5th or 4th most ballots of all time. And just humiliating. And then going into the 14th ballot, he said he had the votes because he could count, though he didn't. And it wasn't that someone voted a way that he didn't think so. It's that he literally could not count. Everybody voted on the 14th ballot exactly as he expected them to. He thought it would be enough. It wasn't. So, I mean, Kevin McCarthy has no control over the House GOP caucus. He is not a very effective leader at all. And honestly, with the things that the House Republicans have done to make it easier to remove the speaker, it would not at all be surprising to me if he was not Speaker of the House in as short of a time as a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. It is interesting to see really how much he did give up to become speaker, and we'll see how that develops in the coming weeks and months. First off, with the classified documents found at Biden's house. There was about 24 documents that was found at the Penn Biden Center in Biden's house in Delaware. There's no evidence that he actually knew that the documents were there to begin with, and it is not a crime if he did not know that they were there.
Yeah, however, I mean, no matter what, somebody made a significant mistake, and a dangerous mistake too, right? This is classified information. These are our nation's top secrets. They should be in the government's hands. They weren't in the government's hands here, so whether it's Biden, whether it's actually on Biden personally,
remains to be seen. At this moment, I would guess that the answer is no, but somebody really messed up here, and they deserve to face some consequences, whatever those may be.
And how are these documents uncovered in the first place?
Yeah, so his attorneys were just going through the Penn Biden Center just to go through all of his papers, just I believe is just a routine thing. And they found these documents. They're documents, by the way, not from his time as president, but from his time as vice president.
Yes,
and
for
they
those who
found
didn't
them
know, he was the vice president for Barack Obama.
for Barack Obama, and then found it, and then they immediately reported it to the National Archives, which is what you are supposed to do in that circumstance. And then they volunteered to search Biden's other offices and residences to try to find additional documents, which were then discovered. And it's good that they were discovered, obviously. Significant national security issue.
Yes, however, this is very different from Trump's document scandal. Trump had over 300 classified documents. Biden only has around 30, isn't it?
Yeah, somewhere in the
Around
30
there.
range.
And he also tried to hide them from those investigating him and ignored subpoenas for the documents. So they have similarities, but also they are very different instances.
Yeah, and then Merrick Garland appointed a special counsel to oversee the investigation into the documents. Probably the right decision by Garland, because he probably should not personally be involved in the investigation, being appointed by Biden. And, of course, similar to what Garland did for Trump, who just 2 days after Trump announced his run for the presidency, appointed a special counsel to oversee all of the Trump-related investigations at the Justice Department, of which there are many.
Yeah, so moving on to politics now. We had some House of Representatives committee assignments. George Santos, yes, that George Santos got a couple of them. He's on the Small Business Committee, the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and of course this comes amidst many calls for him to resign. But Santos has said that he won't resign. And interestingly enough, that's because Kevin McCarthy won't tell him to resign. Why do you think that is, Colin?
Yeah, so it really is a relationship between George Santos and Kevin McCarthy based out of necessity, right? McCarthy needs Santos's vote for Speaker, so McCarthy can't do anything to polarize Santos, because otherwise he's going to lose that vote for Speaker, and Santos can't stop supporting McCarthy, or else McCarthy will try to get Santos and probably succeed at getting Santos expelled from Congress. So it's really, like I said, a relationship based on necessity to the detriment of the country.
Yeah, and this comes, of course, in the latest of a bunch of Santos controversies. For example, claiming that his mom experienced the 9/11 attack. She wasn't even in the country at that time. He claimed that she died in the attack. She did not. He also wore a stolen scarf to a Stop the Steal rally, and
That's really ironic, Charlie.
the
isn't
irony
it?
there is quite obvious. He also set up a fake GoFundMe for a veteran's dog, and then Santos ended up stealing the money and letting the dog die, which, I mean, no matter what side of the political spectrum you are, I mean, you can't be doing that.
Exactly. And then there's the drag stuff where he was revealed to have been a drag queen in Brazil. And of course, there's not really a problem with being a drag queen, except that he and his party are completely against drag. They've basically made it part of their party's identity to try to get rid of drag across the United States.
Yeah, and yeah, that's the party that he ran for, and it is interesting that he managed to essentially lie his way into Congress.
And in some ways, right, basically everybody lies their way into Congress. His were just A, more egregious than everyone else's, and B, he got caught, right? And I mean, we see some, not a lot don't, but we see some Republicans speaking out against him. It's not because they think that what he did was wrong, it's because he exposes the rest of them. He gives them a bad name. And honestly, in my opinion, the Republican Party would be better off, just for the future of their party, expelling George Santos from Congress, because, the Democrats can't define you anymore as the party of George Santos, because you can say, no, we were against George Santos, we saw what he did, we got rid of him.
Yeah, and this is actually a trend of far-right Republicans getting top spots on the Oversight Committee, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Paul Gosar, and Scott Perry, and several others who also opposed Kevin McCarthy. This is likely part of the deal that they made in order for McCarthy to get the votes for Speaker a few weeks ago.
Yeah, and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar, they're getting their committee assignments back after being removed from committees because they were spreading conspiracy theories and appearing at white nationalist rallies. Meanwhile, Kevin McCarthy is kicking several Democrats off committees, kicking Ilhan Omar off of the Foreign Affairs Committee and Eric Swalwell and Adam Schiff off of the Intelligence Committee. It's going to set up a long fight over this. McCarthy can personally just remove Swalwell and Schiff as those committees are both select committees, but with the Foreign Affairs Committee, Omar, that would need to go to a full vote on the House floor as to whether to remove her, and we'll see if McCarthy can get those votes to remove her. But Charlie, there's no real reason for kicking them off committees.
No, I mean, unless they've done something objectively wrong and something against what the U.S. government stands for, then I don't think they should be kicked off their committee. So this does seem like revenge against the Democrats for kicking off Marjorie Taylor Greene and Gosar off those committees a few years ago.
And I mean, McCarthy's basically claimed that he's kicking them off of their committees because they hate America, right? And that's extremely vague and provides no evidence of anything.
Yes, unless we give a definition of that, then I don't think that's a excuse that could be used.
Probably the biggest news story of this week was the tragic death of Tyre Nichols in Memphis at the hands of Memphis police. The video being released on Friday, and it was just, I personally did not watch the video, but I read a lot into it. It's just, I don't plan on watching it, but just completely horrifying what happened there.
Yeah, and this is, of course, a trend. This isn't a single isolated incident. This happens far more often than it should, and this is, I think, a rather unique American problem.
I mean, it's a rather unique American problem, yes, but it's like it's always black people, right? And that I mean, there's people this time trying to make the argument, well, this wasn't like because of racism this time because it was a bunch of black officers, but the institution of policing itself is racist. And the other thing, Charlie, that I thought of when I heard about this was on that same day that this video was released. We saw the video of Paul Pelosi being attacked with a hammer. That video came out that same day.
Yes, and that one you have watched.
That one I have watched. And that was obviously a white person beating up someone else, and the police were there, and the white guy was actually doing something wrong. Tyre Nichols was not really doing anything wrong. He was basically obeying the police were saying, and Paul Pelosi's attacker did not get killed, shot. He didn't even get tased. The police were doing basically the bare minimum. And then with Tyre Nichols, they killed him, and it seemed like it was not just them doing, like, it cannot be justified as just policing. Like, this was clearly just murder, and that, like, they were, I don't know if they were trying to murder him, but they were intentionally being extremely cruel to him.
Yeah, and that really is important to emphasis, that we don't know if the intention was to kill him, but the fact was to, of course, deal significant damage to him.
Yeah, and then, I mean, the officers got fired. I mean, thank goodness the officers got fired, and
a sixth one was fired as well recently.
They're going to be inevitably indicted, hopefully convicted, though those cases are always difficult, but that doesn't really get to the heart of the problem, Charlie, right? We've seen, like, Derek Chauvin, he was convicted, sentenced to, 22 years in prison, I believe?
Yes,
at least.
I believe so.
But did that stop these incidents from happening further? No,
Well,
so I
clearly
don't
not.
really know what the solution is. I think it's a mix of just a lot of police reform. The police do a lot of things that we should really have someone else do. Do we need police to show up for mental health issues? Do we need people with guns to show up?
They do a lot of good, but there's also some things that need reforming.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the concept of police, at least in my opinion, in theory, is not a bad one. It's just that in practice, it has not worked for most people, or not most people, but a large percentage of this country.
Yeah.
Let's start, Charlie, with that Chinese balloon that the U.S. shot down on Saturday after flying over the country for much of the week at about 60,000 feet in the sky. What are your thoughts on it?
I think this is a rather large lapse in U.S. Intelligence, because I mean, we knew that we didn't really see this coming until it was over our territory, did we?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There were 3 over our territory during the Trump administration that he either didn't do anything about or didn't know anything about. One of which, of course, would lie on him, the other on our intelligence agencies. But I think that the key here is that we were mostly, at least we think, able to stop it from gathering intelligence on the U.S. We think that the U.S. jammed it, and we were able to pick up intelligence on these balloons. So hopefully not a successful mission for China.
And do you think shooting it down was the right course of action?
I mean, look, I'm not a foreign policy expert, so I really have no clue. I trust Joe Biden to listen to the military experts, and I'm guessing that they advised him that he should probably shoot it down once it was over the coast. So I'll say that was the right thing to do. Now, to all the Republicans who are just completely outraged that he didn't shoot it down over Montana, first of all, does it matter? Because if it truly was jammed and they couldn't pick up any information about from it, then why did it matter where they shot it down? And
well, the question if it was jammed, then why would it matter if we shot it down in the first place?
I think maybe I personally don't actually know at all, but I'm not sure if the U.S. has recovered it or is planning to recover it. But it might be useful to actually get their hands on the balloon. It's currently somewhere in the ocean, and it obviously did not kill anybody, hurt anybody on the way down. It landed
off the coast of South Carolina near Myrtle Beach.
And it was also, I think, nice that there was minimal disruption to air traffic. They just had to close a couple of airports as opposed to somewhere on the mainland where they would have had to close multiple.
Yes.
Or many.
All right, let's start with the State of the Union with Joe Biden giving a speech that lasted roughly 2.5 hours.
No.
Is that too long?
Like half of that. An
Really?
hour 15.
Huh.
It felt like 2.5 hours.
It did feel very long.
That's not necessarily a bad thing. In certain speeches of some certain presidents, including Biden at times, have felt way too long. But this one felt like a reasonable length. He got to.
Yeah, and I really felt like the message that he was trying to push through is the State of the Union is strong, which he really repeated again at the end.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger story there is the group that was heckling him for a part of that speech.
I mean, so first of all, Biden handled it perfectly.
He did.
I mean, right? He basically managed to flip. He basically managed to convince the or force the Republicans really to stand up and applaud for Medicare and Social Security after they had been calling him a liar for saying that they wanted to cut Social Security and Medicare. Also, fact check is that certain Republicans have actually said that they do want to cut Medicare and Social Security. Senator Rick Scott of Florida, who was the chair of the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee in 2022, he said that all federal programs would sunset after 5 years, including Medicare and Social Security.
And there'd be no guarantee that they would be resumed.
They would be renewed. Ron Johnson said he wanted to basically make it something unrecognizable. Mike Lee had said that he wanted to basically get rid of it. And back to the Rick Scott one, Ronna McDaniel, the chair of the Republican National Committee, endorsed his plan. So it's not like this was just a couple of Republicans. The Republican National Committee endorsed that. But so Yeah, so Biden handled it well, but I think that the bigger story than Biden handling it well was the fact that there were hecklers in the first place. I mean, it's really disturbing. It's completely below the dignity of their office, Charlie.
Yes, I agree. That can't be happening.
Start with East Palestine. So, yeah, maybe I was premature on fun, Charlie.
Yep. There was a train derailment that began to spew toxic waste. Colin, can we get some more on what it was leaking?
Yeah, so, I mean, really, it's something that we should have talked about 2 weeks ago, but it wasn't really especially known. The derailment happened, I believe, on the 3rd day of February. And our last show, I believe we taped on the 13th. But yeah, just that's really when it was revealed. Took forever to get revealed, but just a disaster for the town of East Palestine with this train derailment. Some, in hindsight, probably bad decisions by the state government there on what to do with it. End result is unhealthy air, unhealthy water, likely. And Charlie, I think this could have been avoided.
Oh, absolutely. And I do think that because you were talking about the air and water, there was a concern for a brief amount that this could seep into the groundwater, which of course would have disastrous consequences for the entire region.
Yeah, but I mean, when we talk about how it could have been prevented, I think that one of the key ways it could have been prevented is that there were regulations put in place during the Obama administration that the Trump administration repealed. And then of course, obviously, some blame has to go on Norfolk Southern here.
For those who don't know, Norfolk Southern is the railroad company whose train derailed.
You cannot choose safety over. Sorry. You have to choose safety over profits. You cannot choose profits over safety. And if we cannot trust these companies to make those decisions that are right, then that's where the government has to step in and put regulations in place. That's the entire point of regulations.
So you think the government should start regulating this thing?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, was in East Palestine, I was not actually happy with his response. He said something to the effect of, "Yeah, we're trying to put in new regulations, but unfortunately, these companies are fighting them." Right? That's not the argument that you think it is. They don't have the power other than the power of the purse. So the only thing that they can do is pay you guys not to put regulations in place. That's not legal. I mean, it happens all the time, but it's still not legal.
Let's start by talking about CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, which met in D.C. this week, and it was interesting watching it. Not necessarily a whole lot of substance, but there was a lot of key Republican figures there, and it's getting a lot of speculation towards 2024.
Haley was there. I believe DeSantis was there as well.
DeSantis was not there.
He was not there.
He gave a speech.
He did give a speech
at the Reagan Library.
He was elsewhere. But it does pose some questions for the Republicans going into 2024 with the amount of candidates they have. But also, I think one of the bigger stories is the fact that they had very, very poor attendance to this event. What do you think this means for them, Colin?
Well, I mean, you say poor attendance. The attendance was so poor that for the final day, they had to hire people to go and sit and to they had to hire seat fillers.
Yeah, that is never good for them. But what do you think this means for them in 2024 with the amount of candidates that they have, or possible candidates? Because DeSantis hasn't officially said that he's going to run yet, but there is a assumption that he will.
Charlie, let me just tell you, Ron DeSantis is going to run for president. He's holding events. Either he's held in the last couple days or he's holding events in the near future in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. Those are the first 3 primary states in the GOP calendar. Ron DeSantis is going to run for president. Trump obviously is in the race. There's always the potential that he gets indicted. He's said, though, in the last couple days that even if he is indicted, he's still going to continue running because, of course, he is. And then there's Nikki Haley. Charlie, Nikki Haley's candidacy is crazy. Right? She doesn't have a realistic shot whatsoever.
She doesn't, but it is interesting to see her. She is trying to, of course, distance herself with Trump from Trump. I do think it's interesting. She's pushing a new generational wave of republicanism. Actually, and looking more towards the past, she has some similarities, at least in some of her policies, to Reagan and the Reagan era of politics as well, which I thought
in
was
some ways, yes, but I actually think, I mean, she's basically said on Sean Hannity's show a couple weeks ago that she was unable to name a single policy difference that she had with Trump. She's basically just trying to be the next generation with the same policy. And honestly, that's not that bad of an idea, but it's not a winning idea because so much of the Republican base is committed to Trump, and you're seeing other potential candidates with the same thing, like Tim Scott.
Why would you vote for
Why
would you vote for a new person if you already have someone with the exact same ideology who's proven they can win a presidential election?
Yeah, but it's interesting because I'm not sure that Trump can win another presidential election. He may have ruined himself during his presidency and post-presidency.
So then who do you think is the Republicans' best chance to win then?
Their best chance to win would probably be someone that they just wouldn't nominate, someone like Larry Hogan, a moderate like that.
But of the people who we know are running.
Of the people who could realistically get the nomination, DeSantis is their best shot, but really I don't think that there's anyone that could realistically get the nomination besides Trump or DeSantis.
Yeah, but
I think it will probably be Trump, but could be DeSantis.
If you get DeSantis, you got 28-9, I believe, electoral points basically immediately, because you know he's going to win Florida.
I mean, yes, he is probably going to win Florida. He shockingly won Florida by like 20 points almost in 2022, so much for it being a swing state. But I feel like we already basically knew Florida's probably off the map in 2024 for Democrats.
Yeah, and we will of course have more news on this as more candidates fall into the picture, candidates drop out, as we move very rapidly towards the 2024 election.
It's amazing how just, 3 months ago we were discussing the 2022 election?
And now we're already looking forward to 2024.
Already deep into 2024. Politics is funny like that. Well, I feel like we're always talking about bad news on this show, but there really is a lot of bad news in this world, Charlie.
There is, with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Can we get some more on exactly what happened, Colin?
Yeah, so, at least to me, it's slightly unclear. As far as I can tell, the bank just... There was a bank rush, basically. The FDIC had to take it over, basically.
So what does Silicon Valley Bank do exactly?
I mean, they are one of the biggest banks in the nation.
I believe the 16th largest.
Something like that.
Or
and
they were the 16th largest.
They were the 16th largest. Of course, yeah, no, that collapsed. The second biggest bank collapse in U.S. history. There were $200 billion in that bank. Also, I believe I saw the number that less than 3% of the accounts in that bank had a balance of less than $250,000. And of course, the FDIC only insures up to $250,000. Charlie, what else do you know about this situation?
Well, this is clearly really bad. Of course, you don't want your banks collapsing, but that has really obviously been reflected in the stock market with several days of downward trending. But this is just really a big concern because we do not need another 2008 right now.
No, and do you think that that's possible? And what can the Biden administration do about it? What can Congress do about it to prevent another type of recession? What maybe are they already doing?
I don't really know too much about how to prevent things like this, but I do trust the current administration, and I do hope that they can figure out a solution to this. Because again, as I said, in the middle of possible collapse in terms of our economy with inflation pretty high still, it is still a really big concern.
It would be a disaster. And bank rush is just not good.
Charlie, we're going to start with some news that just broke earlier today as of this taping, a couple days ago when this episode was released. Tragic news out of Nashville, Tennessee, where there was another school shooting that left 3 kids dead, and these kids were elementary school age.
Yeah, from preschool to 6th grade, and yet again, it's the same thing. Again, is anyone surprised?
No one's surprised, but let's take a look at Tennessee for a moment, Charlie. Tennessee's big thing in the last several months has been trying to ban drag queens because they want to, quote-unquote, protect the children. Do you know how many people have died from drag queens in the state of Tennessee?
I can't imagine very many.
Zero. Do you know how many people have died from gun violence?
I don't know, probably 30?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot, and that number grew by 3 today, and they were children.
Was
Like
it 6?
elementary school age children. I think it was 3 kids, 6 people in total, including the shooter, I believe. And and obviously the Republicans saying all the same stuff. I'm absolutely heartbroken. Thoughts and prayers to the people affected, but they do not give a word that I'm not gonna say. They don't. Otherwise, they would be quick to take action so that nothing like this could ever happen again, but they won't because they don't care about the children. They care about the money that is flowing into their pockets from the NRA.
And may I add the fact that they've been spending the last few weeks trying to ban TikTok.
Oh, don't get me started on that because is it the right thing to do? Maybe. Uh, there's definitely big problems with TikTok, but you could be banning assault weapons and you're instead focusing on a social media app. Give me a freaking break. I am so tired of this. By far the biggest story of the week, one of the biggest stories ever in politics involving former President Donald Trump getting indicted by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. At the time that we are taping this, we do not know exactly what the charges are, but there are believed to be 34 felony counts, Charlie, in New York, mostly related to payoffs of Stormy Daniels and potentially other women. Potentially, yeah, so illegal payments that he made or other types of fraud. There's a lot of potential crimes he committed in New York. So we'll see
Yeah,
what
and
happens on Tuesday.
And there's a lot more of us talking about that on last week's show. So if you want some more on that, go check out that episode, which would be season 2, episode 11. But yeah, just a reminder, this isn't the only thing that he's under investigation for. He's under investigation for the January 6th, the stolen documents from the White House, and the election fraud in Georgia as well.
Yeah, and we think that there may be a couple of other investigations as well, potentially stemming from some of the current ones, potential obstruction stuff, could be under investigation for threatening the Manhattan District Attorney. He made some pretty significant threats against Alvin Bragg. We'll see if the judge, obviously this will be known by the time this episode gets posted, but we'll see if the judge in this case decides to put a gag order on Trump, which would basically mean that he would be prevented from talking about the case. And if he did not follow that, he could face fines or even pretrial detention. Charlie, I have a hard time believing that Trump could stay silent.
Yeah, I agree. That doesn't seem very likely. And also, considering that he's in New York and we know what happens when things don't go his way, I think that there is some genuine concern about protests in New York with some of his supporters going too far, which, of course, if that does happen, we will continue to talk about that as it develops as well. When we find out the cases, we find out what exactly is going on with that, as well as what the possible fallout of this is. We will, of course, talk about that most likely on next week's show.
Yeah, and Charlie, you mentioned potential protests. What's worth noting here is this feels a lot more secure than what happened on January 6th. Why? Well, Trump was pretty much in charge of law enforcement in DC on January 6th. He, of course, is not in charge of law enforcement now. The New York Police Department, something like 35,000 troops. They're on
Yep.
very, very high alert in New York City. So we'll see what happens, but it's very hard to anticipate any violence actually succeeding on a large scale, especially since it seems like the Trump supporters that are interested are mostly in jail for January 6th. The rest of them mostly not interested.
Well, and also considering the fact that previously we didn't know something like this could be possible. Now we do, so the police in New York can assume a worst case scenario so that if there is anything that happens, that it will be swiftly dealt with.
Yeah, that's another good point that you make. We're actually going to start, Charlie, with a preview of the 2024 election because there's a lot of interesting signs
heading up to that election, and we'll start with the presidential race, which is obviously the biggest race. And let's start, Charlie, by talking about Ron DeSantis, a potential candidate for the presidency. He is not officially announced, but he's made some decisions in the last couple weeks that really seem to be potentially political suicide for him if he plans to run nationally.
Yeah, he certainly has. He really mismanaged, especially just a couple of things with Trump, as well as a new bill to build a prison right next to Disney, which was really frowned upon, considering more people visit Disney World than live in the state of Florida. So, yeah, really bad moves from him, and this could really jeopardize a possible campaign in 2024.
Yeah, and you really also have to wonder, is he even planning on running for the Oval Office at this point in 2024? Because it feels like it might be Trump's nomination to lose in the Republican Party, and DeSantis, you said some really poor decisions. So he might not even run, which would be kind of shocking in a lot of ways.
Well, then for the Democrats, they have Biden, and then really no one else.
No, and Biden, of course, hasn't officially announced his run. Some other candidates that are running for president that likely won't even win. On the Democratic side, you've got Marianne Williamson, who obviously has like no chance. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announcing that he's going to be running. Unlikely that he'll do better than like 0.5%. Joe Exotic running for president, unclear what party he's running for. Obviously, that should not be taken seriously at all. Nikki Haley obviously announcing that she's running for president on the Republican side, and then Tim Scott just announcing in the last week that he's forming an exploratory committee to run, which is a sign that he is going to run, especially since he's been doing a lot of events, Charlie, in Iowa and New Hampshire, the first two primary states on the Republican side.
Yeah, and also up for in 2024 is the Senate, which will be crucial considering the Democrats currently hold that chamber by one seat and have a very difficult 2024 map. Can we get a little bit more about exactly what they would have to do to hold their current Senate majority, Colin?
Yeah, so I want to do this in the form of addressing a lot of Democrats out there, because there's a big question going on the Democratic side right now. Okay, given the Senate map in 2024, given just how difficult it is for Democrats, right? They have to defend the states of Montana, Montana, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. And their best pickup attempts are Texas, which is Ted Cruz's seat, Florida, and maybe Missouri, though that's a long shot, although in some ways you could consider Florida and Texas to be a long shot. But so the question a lot of Democratic voters have been wondering is, what's the best place to put your money if you're a Democratic voter? If you want to donate to a Senate campaign, because obviously the earlier you donate to a campaign, the better it is. Well, let me tell you where you do not want to donate, because there's a good debate to be had about where you should. Where you don't want to donate is California, right? Adam Schiff, one of the Democratic candidates there for Senate, and we'll get into that Senate race a little later as well, because it's kind of wild. Adam Schiff in the first quarter raised $6.5 million. He has $24.5 million of cash on hand. That's not a competitive seat. It's only competitive in the primary. And I would bet that just about every Democratic voter would prefer to not have their preferred Democrat win that race than to have the Republicans retake the Senate. But I mentioned a really tough map. Michigan, though, Charlie, does seem to be like a state that Democrats are starting to shore up. The Michigan GOP just in absolute shambles right now. That the state party has about $2,000 of $2,000 on hand, and in the Senate race there, Alyssa Slotkin, the likely Democratic candidate, has raised $3 million in quarter one. The Republican candidate, the only Republican that's announced so far, raised $33,000. So not a good look for that party.
And something that I think is going to help the Democrats in terms of political things in this country are the next two things we're going to talk about, that being mass shootings and abortion.
Yeah, mass shootings and abortion, definitely. But real quick, before we move on from elections, George Santos, Charlie, has announced that he is going to be running for re-election in what can only be described as Republicans' worst nightmare.
Yeah, you don't really want him running, do you?
No, it's not a great look on your ticket. You cannot imagine that he is popular in his district.
Popular in his party or even popular in the nation.
Democrats would love nothing more than for George Santos to be the nominee, the Republican nominee for that district, because it would be an easy flip. They only need 5 flips in the House, Charlie, to retake that chamber, and that would be a really big deal if they could retake the House in 2024. Start with, Charlie, what has got to be the biggest story in media in a long, long time. Tucker Carlson has, in one way or another, left Fox News. He hosted the second highest rated show on cable television, Tucker Carlson Tonight, in the 8 p.m. primetime hour. Fox News, of course, the highest rated channel on cable. Tucker often talked about things such as fake election fraud, or the Great Replacement theory, a racist theory that has been widely debunked, but also used often to justify mass shootings, as it did with the Buffalo shooting last year. It's unclear exactly why Carlson was fired, but Charlie, what are your thoughts?
It is interesting to see. Of course, he does control a very important show on Fox News. This also comes at the same time that Don Lemon, a popular host on CNN, was also fired. And this is interesting considering that over the last few years, large networks of news have really seen a drop in views as independent news sources, like those on Twitter, if we can call those news sources, have seen a rise in popularity. So it is interesting to see as news sources become less popular that these popular hosts are beginning to be jettisoned.
Yeah, and you make some interesting points, but Fox News's ratings, actually, especially Tucker Carlson's, remain very, very high, and something that Fox News has done a great job of is telling their viewers that Fox News is really the only source that they could trust, and Tucker Carlson did that especially, and you have to wonder, what's his audience going to do now? Are they going to follow him to wherever he goes next, or are they going to stick with Fox News? And you might think that they would stick with Tucker, just given how popular he is on the right, one of the biggest figures on the right, frankly. But also, Fox News Primetime holds a lot of power, so his influence could lessen significantly. I mean, look at what happened to Bill O'Reilly and Megyn Kelly when they lost their Fox News shows. They became nobodies, frankly. But I do think that this is good news, even if Tucker does go and do something else, because they'll get these lies off of basic cable packages, right? Every American that has cable is paying Fox News a significant fee, even if they don't watch them. So it'll take those lies off of basic cable packages. Also mean, like, hotels, you probably won't see them on in hotel lobbies. You definitely won't see it on military bases anymore. So those are some definitely good effects.
And that is certainly significant considering the military does tend to be slightly right of center.
Definitely.
Speaking of Fox, their defamation lawsuit has finally been settled with Dominion Voting Systems, and I actually do believe that might be one of the reasons that Tucker Carlson has been in some way removed from the company, because I do believe that Fox is concerned that his shenanigans, shall I say, involving completely lying about the 2020 election, may cause Fox to come under fire with even more lawsuits in the future. So I do see this as possibly a defensive move by Fox to try to avoid more lawsuits in the future.
Yeah, I also think that there could just be something else going on behind the scenes, because there's lots of anchors that are responsible. Tucker Carlson, actually, was not one of the biggest anchors spreading the lies about Dominion. He definitely spread them, but not nearly as much as anchors such as Maria Bartiromo or Janine Pirro. So there could be something else going on. But yeah, this trial settled, which is a really, really big deal. Fox obviously having to pay Dominion significant money, $787.5 million, and they get spared having to go to trial, which is probably very good for them because it will stop a lot of really embarrassing things from coming out about that network.
Yeah, of course, the several lies that they've made over the course of since the 2020 election. Of course, those revealing details would have come out. However, they weren't. Some were already stated, like the fact that they know that they were lying to their audience. But a lot of damage could have been done, and it is unfortunate to see that Dominion has decided to settle this case.
Yeah, and Charlie, you make an interesting point there because, yes, it has come out that they've lied to their audience, but I would say that most Fox News viewers just don't know that because they really only watch Fox News, and Fox News hasn't told them that. It would be much harder to keep your audience from hearing that, though, if there was a high-profile trial that actually went on. That, of course, did not happen.
Yeah, it didn't, and I believe that is unfortunate, and I do believe that Fox did get lucky here. They are under some other lawsuits, so we'll see what ends up coming out with those as well, interestingly enough.
Yeah, Smartmatic's, of course, suing them for even more than Dominion. And what I think was interesting, right, is especially with Dominion's case, we'll see about Smartmatic's, but Dominion's case seemed to be pretty rock solid. They had a lot of evidence of defamation. What they maybe did not have evidence of is the $1.6 billion figure that seems to be highly inflated. So I have to wonder if it was just a technique to get Fox News to settle with them for more money than they otherwise could have gotten, just so that Fox could avoid a trial. And if that is the case, then that worked out really, really well for Dominion.
Yeah, that could be, and that is interesting.
On the political side, as we always do. And Charlie, how about we start in the state of Montana?
Yes, Montana's representative in the House has been shut off from the House floor. Colin, can we get a little bit more on exactly why, and obviously that this was politically motivated, but politically motivated in what way?
Yeah, so this is Representative Zoe Zephyr. She is trans, which is why the Republicans shut her off the floor. Attempted to shut her off committees, but were unsuccessful in doing so. So she, though, currently banned from the floor, which means that she cannot take votes, can't speak on the floor. And Charlie, this seems quite similar to what happened in Tennessee. Just a few weeks ago, Justin Pearson and Justin Jones, both expelled from that chamber for protesting gun violence. Gloria Johnson also almost expelled from the Tennessee State House as well. And you see something similar but slightly different happening in Montana, though for a completely different reason.
But however, crucially in Tennessee, and this might end up happening as well in Montana, those were later returned and rebuked as those representatives were allowed to come back.
Yeah, bring up an interesting point though, because the problem is she's not been expelled. She's just been banned from the floor, so there's not much that anyone else can do about it. She is suing, saying that she deserves or she has the right to be on the floor as a duly elected member of the state house. We'll see how that suit goes, but another fascist move, as we're seeing a lot.
I don't think that comparison is all too fair. I do agree that the current Republican Party is moving in that direction. They will possibly eventually get there, but I do think that claim is not quite accurate as of currently.
But we're going to start with some news that broke over the weekend. Charlie, the one topic that we seem to keep discussing over and over and over again on this podcast is mass shootings. There was another really bad one at a mall in Allen, Texas. Let's get some more.
Yeah, And as I said after Uvalde, I said it after Buffalo, I said it after the mass shootings in California that we talked about. How many people that will it take? 100? 200? I guess we'll have to find out.
Yeah,
Because until something like that happens, nothing's going to get done.
I mean, I'm not convinced that something's going to get done even if that does happen, but this one was not a 100, 200 person event. This was 8 or 9 people that ended up dying at a mall. It's notable in several other ways, though, one of which there were several children that died, two grade school aged kids, and also a 3-year-old.
If you include the gunmen, it is indeed 9 fatalities.
Yeah, 9 fatalities with the gunmen. Okay. The other reason that this was super notable is that, and this is something that I think we've talked about on the podcast before, about how, as bad as it sounds, it might be beneficial for us to see this, to actually see the violence. Well, we did. There are photos. I've seen them, and I've got to be honest, they will haunt me for the rest of my life. They are unbelievably tragic. We're talking about photos of people, dead people covered in sheets with blood all around them, shoes of brains oozing out down the street. I mean, it's so disturbing, Charlie.
Yeah, and this is gonna keep happening. It's the sad truth. This won't stop.
Yeah, right. Where are you safe right now from a mass shooting, right? You're not safe. You're not safe at a mall. You're not safe at school.
I'll tell you
You're
where
not-
you're safe. You're safe at an NRA convention.
You're safe at an NRA convention because they
They
ban
don't
guns.
allow guns.
They ban guns, and that is how you know that they think that guns make society less safe. They will not allow them at their own conventions, even though they say the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Well, this was Texas, where there are more guns per capita than anywhere else in the world. And where was the good guy with the gun? Did they show up? They show up, Charlie?
Of course they didn't.
Of course they didn't show up, and frankly, I have had it with the thoughts and prayers people, all of the Republicans in Congress, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, all of them offering their thoughts and their prayers, as if their thoughts and their prayers mean a dang thing to any one of the family members of the people that were slaughtered, who literally had their face blown off. I mean, there's an account from a first responder who said that he turned a woman around, she had no face. That's the type of damage that this type of weapon can do to somebody. And Republicans, thoughts and prayers. I offer you my thoughts and prayers. And one of them was pressed on this issue. They basically said, no, thoughts and prayers work because there is a God that's controlling everything. Well, couple of comments on that, Charlie. Okay. First of all, the thoughts and the prayers haven't seemed to do much to stop more mass shootings, right?
No, they've done nothing.
They've done nothing. And also, if there is a God, say that there is a God that's controlling everything, right? And this God is allowing for these mass shootings to happen, then I'm sorry, you worship the devil. Right?
Ain't that the truth?
That's what it is. And also, Republicans, they're voting against mental health funding. They say mental health is the problem. They're voting against the funding, right? So it's not like they actually believe in any of the other solutions that they're proposing. They're just all bought out by the NRA.
Of course they are.
So yeah, those are photos that will haunt me. It is truly heartbreaking, and it is more heartbreaking to know that nothing will be done. It is not. It is genuinely not safe. And Fox News, you know what they're saying, Charlie? They're saying you should be prepared to kill everyone you meet. That's not how we should live. That's not how we should have to live. We shouldn't have to live in fear. Every child in America has had to learn the run, hide, fight, right? I mean, I had to learn that in kindergarten, right? why is that something that we need to be teaching our children above how to do basic arithmetic, right? Children go to school to learn about math and reading and writing, not how to avoid getting shot by a gun, right? We as a society cannot continue to live this way. We just cannot do it. We'll start with some out of New York where a man who is allegedly named George Santos just got indicted.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we don't even really know if that's his actual name. We'll find out. But the pathological liar known as George Santos has finally been indicted for, I believe, campaign violations.
Yeah, a bunch of violations that mostly campaign violations regarding money laundering and wire fraud, I believe. Mess for him. And Charlie, it's really interesting to see the Republicans, to at least some extent, continuing to stand by him. He already doesn't have committee assignments, but he's not resigning, and other Republicans, or most other Republicans in the House, including Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, are not calling on him to resign or thinking about expulsion right now.
Well, I'll tell you why, Colin. I'll tell you why. It's
Yeah.
because they have such a slim majority in the House, and with those far-right Republicans in the Freedom Caucus who are so unreliable at actually compromising with anyone on anything, they need as many votes as they can get. So even if you have a man like George Santos, as unreliable and terrible as he is, for the Republicans themselves, actually, having that vote is so critical for them that they don't care who that vote is.
Well, yeah, we'll get back to Santos in a sec, but on a related note, right? He was the deciding vote, Charlie, in that bill on the debt ceiling, and I mean the debt ceiling is a whole nother thing going on right now.
Still no deal on that. And we're rapidly rolling towards that June 1st deadline, which was laid out by the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen about, I believe, in mid-April.
Yeah, mid-April, and there are growing calls from the left for Biden to take unilateral action, invoke the 14th Amendment, but so far Biden has not done that. Republicans very, very opposed to that idea. But yeah, Santos was the deciding vote on that House Republican wish list bill that would raise the debt ceiling. He's a very, very important part of that Republican majority right now, and if he does resign or gets expelled, that's a district that Biden won. Republicans, because of Santos, are very unpopular in that district right now. They're not going to win it again.
No, I can't imagine that they would. And real quick, to get back to another point you were talking about when you were talking about the 14th Amendment, what exactly is the 14th Amendment? What does it state exactly that relates to the U.S. debt?
Well, I mean, the 14th Amendment has a lot of things, but the specific provision about the debt basically says that it is the president's responsibility to pay off the nation's debts, right? And that the U.S. must pay its debts, right? And defaulting on our debts would go against that. In fact, it's not even clear that having a debt ceiling is constitutional. That's just an issue that's never come before the court. It might end up coming before the court in the next couple of weeks. We'll see where that goes. But Charlie, one other thing on Santos's indictment, the bail for that was set at, I believe, $500,000.
Yes, you're correct.
He found the money for that. He got that money from, well, it's not entirely clear, from 3 anonymous donors. What do you make of that?
Yeah, shady. I mean, it's George Santos. Everything involving him is shady. So,
Well,
when something's shady involving that guy, there's something going on.
Well, yes, I agree with that, but I mean, it could be a whole bunch of reasons. It's not necessarily shady, but we could learn, if we learned who those donors were, we could learn potentially a lot about who is backing him, because right, he started out with no money. Right, there's a reason these campaign finance violations. There's a reason that he got charged with them. It's unclear how his campaign got funded. So someone's backing him, which means that there's a good chance that he's compromised by someone. We could learn who that is. with this debt ceiling deal brokered between Biden and McCarthy.
Yeah, this of course is huge because if it does get passed, which it is likely to, it will prevent the U.S. from defaulting on its debt, which would, if the U.S. had defaulted on its debt, would have caused major global economic problems, particularly for the U.S., and it would have lowered the U.S.'s credit limit as well as credibility.
Yeah, so obviously a very fluid situation. It will certainly be a very different situation when this episode is out Thursday morning than it is right now when we're taping this Tuesday evening, roughly 9 p.m. But as what we know as of now is that the House Rules Committee approved the bill going to the floor for debate. That happened Tuesday night in a very narrow vote. So there will be debate on the bill on the floor. There will be a vote on final passage on the floor. It will likely pass the House. McCarthy claims that he can deliver about 2/3 of his caucus to vote for it. I'm kind of doubtful that he can deliver that many votes. I do think that this is a bill that the majority of the Democratic caucus will vote for. We shall see, but I fully expect that this bill will pass the House. I expect that this bill will pass the Senate and will be signed by Biden. Now, the question is, will it pass the Senate in time? Because we're right up against the deadline, Charlie. The deadline, according to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, expects the U.S. to default on June 5th, so it would need to be passed very soon, and it's unclear if it can be passed that soon. So that raises some other concerns. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah, considering how notoriously slow Congress can be.
Absolutely, Congress very notoriously slow. But Charlie, we mentioned a deal brokered between Biden and McCarthy. Democrats wanted just a clean raise of the debt ceiling, as has been done numerous times throughout history, including during multiple Republican administrations. The Republicans are not actually how should I put it, fiscally responsible party that they claim to be. Under Donald Trump, the national debt went up roughly $8 trillion. Trump's presidency accounts for more than a quarter of the total debt in U.S. history. Meanwhile, under Biden, the deficit is quickly being lowered. It's the same thing during the Obama administration, and by the end of the Bill Clinton administration, the deficit was actually in the negative. So the government was bringing in more money than it was giving out. So Republicans, despite their hypocrisy, they say that we need to be fiscally responsible. We're only going to raise the debt if you attach these strings. So they passed their own bill that had no chance of actually getting signed into law. McCarthy sat down with Biden to negotiate, and they came to a deal. And it really feels like, Charlie, that Republicans did not get nearly as much as everybody expected them to, including other Republicans expected the Republicans to get a lot more in this deal.
Yeah, it is definitely interesting to see how well Biden did in the negotiations to get really a lot of what he wanted. He didn't give up too much, I don't believe.
It didn't give up too much. I will, though, say it does in some ways feel wrong to call it a deal, because generally a deal implies that both sides actually get something. This was really a hostage situation, and the Democrats paid for it, though not as much as they were necessarily expected to have to pay for it, right? What did the Democrats get out of the deal? They got a raise to the debt ceiling, but that's
yes, because
not
the
a Democratic
Democrats
priority.
take care
That
about
is
the integrity of this country, which the Republicans have proved time and time again that they don't.
they do not care about it, right? I guarantee you, there are members of the Republican Party. Won't say it's all. Won't even say it's most. There are members. I'm specifically looking at the Freedom Caucus, who would not mind if the U.S. defaulted on their debts. In fact, Donald Trump said that the U.S. should default. A former president of the United States said that they should default on their debts.
Yeah, let's start with that debt ceiling deal, which is now passed both chambers of Congress, which is a new development since the last time we talked, and has been signed by Biden.
Yeah, there was a lot of thoughts that this was going to go through, and indeed has. This stops the U.S. from defaulting on its debt and pushes that limit to after 2025. So after the
it'll be in the
2024 election,
next Congress.
which after 2024 will be crucial depending on who wins the 2024 election. Some things we will talk about later in the politics section may affect that, actually. But it is crucial this deal got done. It is good to see that we finally did get some compromise between McCarthy and Biden. It is interesting to see who got what. It is definitely easy to see that the Republicans could have definitely gotten more of what they asked for. But it is also to see that it is kind of a defeat for the Democrats that they had to give up anything at all to pass the debt ceiling bill.
Yeah, I mean, credit. I'm actually shocked I'm saying this, but credit to Kevin McCarthy for actually being willing to come to the negotiating table and do something. I do think that part of the reason that Biden was able to get out as much or stop the Republicans from getting as much out of it as people imagined that the Republicans might get out of it is because Biden basically saw right through the Republicans and saw, yeah, they're not actually going, or at least the majority of the Republicans are not actually going to allow the country to default. So they don't have the leverage. I do. And that, right, leverage is the most powerful negotiating tool, Charlie.
Well, obviously, if you have the leverage, you control the pace, tempo, and what's going on with the situation.
Yeah. And I think also something really interesting is who voted for this bill and who didn't, because what you saw is it did pass fairly comfortably in both the House and the Senate, but it was mostly the middle parts of each party that was voting for it. The far rights and the more progressives, they were not fans of this bill, Charlie, and a lot of far left Democrats did not vote for it. A lot of far right Republicans did not vote for it. In fact, most, I would say, of the far right Republicans did not vote for it. In fact, more Democrats voted for it than Republicans.
Yes, and that is interesting to see, because one of the huge exceptions to that was Marjorie Taylor Greene, who actually happened to vote for the bill, which was a surprise to me.
Yeah, someone who did not vote either way was Lauren Boebert. She actually missed the vote. She said afterwards that that she didn't vote out of protest, which is odd, but even more odd when you consider the fact that there's video of her running up the Capitol steps right when the vote was closing to try to go cast her vote and being told by reporters that the vote had closed, and she seemed very disappointed by that, which makes you wonder, what was she doing? She knew that there was a vote. She was just not there and not doing her job.
Maybe she set her alarm wrong or something.
Yeah, let's dive into it with the biggest story of the week, arguably, the Trump indictment. He's been indicted again. This time for something far more serious than the last time. Colin, what exactly is he in trouble for now?
Yeah, so that first indictment, of course, that was in New York, indicted by the Manhattan District Attorney. That's Alvin Bragg, indicted on 34 felony counts, mostly regarding the payoffs of Stormy Daniels and another woman. This is an indictment in the Southern District of Florida by Special Counsel Jack Smith, who was appointed back in November. 37 counts in this indictment. First 31 are willful retention of national defense information. Those charges, by the way, those are under the Espionage Act. There is also a charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice, withholding a document or a record, corruptly concealing a document or record, concealing a document in a federal investigation, scheme to conceal, false statements and representations. So lot of counts in this indictment.
And yet-
it's a pretty big deal, Charlie. Some of these
Yes.
counts, lots of jail time associated. If anyone
And
else
yet-
did anything like this, they'd be in jail for the
No.
rest of their life.
And yet, it doesn't matter. He's still going to win the Republican nomination. It doesn't matter what happens to him here. It might affect the presidency result, possibly. But for the primary, this honestly kind of helps him, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get in a couple minutes to the reaction from the Republican side. But Charlie, like just the gravity of these charges, like what was done here, he took our nation's most sensitive secrets, including, according to the charging document, some nuclear secrets.
And he put them in the shower.
He put them in the shower. The former president of the United States, everybody, and yeah, he was arraigned in court a few hours before our taping this episode. No pretrial detention. You think that would happen to anyone else? No, that there would be pretrial detention. But this is a big deal what he did, and I think it really is important, Charlie, to talk about that Republican reaction, because they are set to nominate him to basically just forget about the fact that this is what he did the last time in office. Committed
And
these
no doubt that he'll do it again.
flagrant offenses. Oh, no doubt that he'll do it again. But also, I'm struck by something that was actually said by Rachel Maddow. Said like if this is actually going to help Trump in the Republican field, then in today's Republican Party, it's an asset to be a criminal.
Yeah, it is.
And I mean, if you look at there are some Republicans who are saying like, that yeah, these are very serious charges. You can't just dismiss them. But most of the Republicans just saying, but what about Hillary Clinton's emails? What about the boxes in Biden's garage? Both of which, I don't think you're going to find anybody saying that what happened with the Biden boxes and the Hillary emails, that they acted well. But there's a difference between bad behavior and criminal behavior.
Well, and also with the other people who've had documents found at their house, Pence and Biden, they both returned them.
Yeah, when they found
Something
them,
that Trump did not.
he intentionally concealed them from the investigators. I would not be surprised if there's still boxes of documents at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, maybe in the room that he flooded.
Yeah, well, and think about, Charlie. Think about the people that have put their lives on the line to gain this intelligence, and look at what happened to it. Do you think that our allies are going to share intelligence with us anymore?
No.
If that's how it's going to be treated.
Yeah.
And that just about does it for part 1 of our politics year in review. Part 2 will be out at the same time tomorrow.
And make sure you subscribe to the C&C Talks podcast and visit our website, cctalks.com, for everything you need to know about the show. Call us with your questions at 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630, and we will answer them on the new season. And of course, follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast. We'll be back with season 3 of C&C Talks on January 4th, but until then, enjoy the holiday season and have a happy new year. For our production team of Morris and Zack, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie. We'll see you in 2024.